order the regular meeting of local planning agency for May 2024. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mary Albright.
Steve Coates.
Linda Glover.
James McPherson.
Sam Kincaid.
Susan Moss.
Ton Nguyen.
Melissa Ozimek.
And if we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second. All right, and it passed. And a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right.
Right, because you're an alternate, it's the bonus form, you can definitely observe, but just for this time. I'm sorry, we're ready to move on to public comments?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for.
I'm sorry, Joanna.
All right, and passes. Oh, it's going.
Did you all comment on that?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
You want to do it? Let's-
let's try it one more time. There we go.
All right, and the minutes are accepted. And are there any public comments not relating to what's already on the agenda? All right.
Okay, and before we get started, before I swear everyone in for the QJ, I just got to ask the board, has any member of the public or anyone other than staff contacted you about the hearing here today?
No.
Okay. All right, so there's been no ex parte communications. I'll now swear all the witnesses in, and y'all can all stand, whoever's going to testify on your behalf. Everyone raise your right hand. Everyone swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay, all y'all are under oath. And we're here for the quasi-judicial hearing involving a variance at 27 Ferry Road. Mr. Gibson will lead off.
Good evening, Tim Gibson, Supervisor for the City of Fort Walton Beach. So for this variance, on July 25th, 2023, a residential building permit was submitted to construct a new 3,923 square foot single family house at 27 Ferry Road. Then in February of this year, a driveway permit was issued for the same property. And on the site plan that was submitted with that application indicated a driveway and a sidewalk to be constructed in the area in the front of the house only. During the building department's final inspection, they discovered that there was a lot more concrete that had been put down on the property, including beside the house and behind it. So they brought that to my attention, and then we looked at it from an impervious side, and that's where we discovered there was an issue on there with the additional impervious added. On March 27th, 2024, the applicant submitted for the variance to increase the maximum allowed impervious surface area. And according to the LDC, this property is zoned R1 and the maximum impervious for R1 is 50%. But according to the survey, this came out at 52.3% impervious. Now for the discussion in here, according to section 8.2.1A of the city's land development code, the purpose of the variance is to provide a means to grant permission to depart from the standards of the zoning district where unique characteristics of a parcel together with the imposition of the specific regulations of the zoning district result in a hardship. In order for the application for a variance to be approved or approved with conditions, the local planning agency shall make a positive finding based on the evidence submitted for each of the following provisions. And this one's going to be a little bit with the additions, just like we had before with this is in a floodplain, so it's going to have the additional provision on top of the 9 that we normally deal with for these variances. The first of those, though, is that the need for the proposed variance is due to the unusual or unique physical shape, configuration, or other physical condition of the development site. And this property is a little bit unusual shaped. You should have a survey as part of your packets, and I've got one I can display up on there as well. This property is a little bit larger than the normal size properties that we see in the city. It is approximately 0.23 acres in size. Staff does not believe that the unusual shape of this property, though, contributed to the excess impervious amounts being added to the property. Next is if the literal interpretation of the LDC would deprive the property owner of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. And again, this impervious amount is a restriction we apply to all of our properties. And so this literal interpretation of this would not be any hardship on them as opposed to any other property in the city. Next is that the special conditions are not the result of the actions of the property owner, and in this case, obviously the additional impervious that was added on there, this was a new construction and that was done in there, so this is directly due to the actions of the property owner. Next is that the approval of the proposed variance shall not provide the property any special privilege that is denied to other development sites within the same zoning district, and that 50% restriction or 75, depending on the zoning district, is something that we do enforce pretty stringently in the city. This deals with our floodplain and dealing with the NFIP and the CRS, the Community Rating System program that we participate in. The proposed variance is the minimum variance that results in a reasonable use of the land or the structure. Obviously this is already there now, so any less of a variance wouldn't really achieve a lot for this situation. Number 6 is that the approval of the variance shall ensure compatibility of the resulting development with the land uses and character of the adjacent and surrounding neighborhood. Staff does think that this obviously would be compatible with the characteristics of the surrounding area. However, we are concerned with the potential stormwater runoff from here. As I said, this isn't a floodplain, and the addition of the extra impervious on there could lead to some additional stormwater runoff from this property. Next is the proposed variance is consistent with the intents and purposes of the requirements of this LDC. LDC section 1.00.01 B7 states that the intent of the LDC partly is to being equitable in terms of consistency with established regulations and procedures resulting or respecting the rights of property owners while taking into consideration the interest of all of the citizens of the city. And again, this is something that is enforced across the city, regardless of the zoning district. They all have established impervious amounts that we will not let people go over. Number 8 is that this is consistent with the provisions of the comprehensive plan. Policy EE 5.4 in the city's comprehensive plan states in part, the city will continue to utilize best practices to reduce the flood risk in coastal areas which results from high tide events, storm surge, flash floods, stormwater runoff, and the related impacts of sea level rise, including but not limited to the use of best available data in historical floods and preliminary firm maps. And one of the best practices with FEMA is the imposition of the impervious restrictions on properties, just so that way we got as much actual ground able to absorb the water from these stormwater runoffs that are available out there. The final one for that section is that this is not detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, and staff does not feel like this would be detrimental in that aspect other than the potential for the stormwater, additional stormwater. Next is section 8.2.6 of the Land Development Code that states, in addition to the required findings set forth in section 8.2.2 of the LPA, that the following findings for the variance is requested in the area of a flood hazard. Again, this is in a flood zone of an AE9. And what that means is just means it's coastal flooding, and the 9 is the base flood elevation that's established by FEMA, which is 9 feet above sea level, that they believe is the 1% chance every year that this flood inundation could go up to 9 feet there. So for that, the criteria in there is that there is no anticipated danger to the public safety from materials that may be swept onto other lands, thereby causing the injury of others. Staff doesn't feel that that would be an issue. This is simply a matter of ground coverage and the impervious coverage for the flat work that's done there. There is no anticipated danger to life and property resulting from flooding or erosion. Staff does not feel like this would cause a danger to life or property. Next is that the proposed facility and its contents are not susceptible to flood damage. Again, this is not a matter of the structure or the contents. This is the flat work out there that the staff is concerned with. The next criteria in there about facility and services to the public, providing at the facility, the waterfront location and alternative locations for the proposed use are not applicable to this situation. Next would be the safe and access to the property can be maintained in times of floods, and that entire area is in a floodplain, and that there's no additional risk of this property being isolated due to a flood than their surrounding neighborhood. The proposed variance is the minimum required to avoid undue hardship and is designed to address the expected heights, velocity, duration, rate of rise, and sediment transport to the floodwaters. Staff does not feel like this variance will cause any issues at that site. However, the increased impervious could add to the stormwater runoff on adjacent properties. Next is that the proposed variance shall not result in increased costs of providing government services during and after the flood conditions, which staff does not feel is applicable here. And finally, that this shall not result in an adverse effect on the city's community rating system, which this would not have in there. With that, just to kind of highlight some areas in there. So when the initial permit came in for the structure, that was all fine. It met all the requirements in the land development code. The driveway permit that I mentioned coming in for this one, the area highlighted green in there on that one there is what the permit was for. In your attachments on there, you've got one, it shows a yellow highlighted area. That was actually part of the application that they had applied for that permit for those specific areas. The areas I highlighted in red on there are from the final as-built survey for the property that showed the additional impervious that was added onto the property. Like I said, on the sides and then behind the house there where that was added onto there. And with that, staff finds that the variance request does not meet all the criteria outlined in section 8.2.2 of the Land Development Code. And based on those findings of fact, staff respectfully recommends the local planning agency deny the variance request for 27 Ferry Road Northeast to increase the maximum allowed impervious surface amount from 50% to 52.3%. And the only thing I would add on there is we did receive one public comment that was opposed to this variance with the concerns of the additional stormwater runoff. Pending questions?
Yes, was it next door to the house or down the street?
We didn't get an address. They didn't go into all of that. They just basically, they had asked if they could make a written statement to present here. However, those are not allowed due to the fact that, you know, it's a quasi-judicial hearing and all testimony has to have the ability to be cross-examined and sworn in, and they couldn't do that.
What's the actual square footage we're talking about? The 2.3%? You know what that is?
230 square feet.
230 square feet.
Is that a driveway, an extended driveway into the backyard on the side of the house? Is that what that is?
that's actually
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, what's that?
That's a driveway, that red?
It's all connected with the driveway there. It's all one connected piece of concrete there. Now, however it's going to be used, I can't really say. I mean, that would be up to them to tell you how it's going to be used there.
None of that red was in like the building permit? It was
That's correct. What was permitted was for the green area.
right for the driveway, but for the house. House is new too, correct?
I'm sorry?
The house is new also, right?
That's correct.
Yes,
The house was all permitted. Yeah, everything was
wasn't
fine
part
with the
of the
permit
house.
for the house. It's just when they came in for the driveway permit afterwards, the only areas that we considered looking at for impervious was the green area that was indicated on that application.
And how far of, did you give a percentage at that time as to how close or not close they were to not being, how close they were to 50% and being out of code?
They're at 52.3% is what the survey showed them at impervious.
When the original
Oh.
application came in,
I don't know
You
what
don't.
that number was. We do run the numbers on there. We have a system that can get pretty close, calculating square footage. And essentially we will take kind of what they apply for, figure out the exact square footage of the whole property, figure out the square footage of, the sidewalks, the driveways, the patios, and the house itself, just to come up with what that number is. Typically what we do in that case, if our numbers are coming up, about 47% or lower, we're, okay, you're good to go. If we're getting around 49, 50, 51, we ask for some clarifications like from an actual survey. And that's what we ended up doing on this one, and that survey came back at the 52.3.
Was it the builder that applied for the permit?
I'm sorry?
Was it the builder that applied for the permit?
Yes.
and the space, the green was what was on the permit. The other part, like, looks like it's leading from the street, and then the sidewalk, that was already standing there? Or
So
was that poured as well?
That was poured as well. That's not really considered part of the impervious though, because that's still public right of way.
Gotcha.
That can be there. The impervious calculation is for the private property portion of it, not the right of way.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Tracy Acree, and my wife, we own Tracy Acree Construction, and we've recently taken on 2 partners, my daughter and my future son-in-law, Gavin Wolf. This is my daughter's house. We built it, and she's gonna move into, well, she's in it now, has been in it for a while, and we need to get our CO. We don't have any insurance on the property right now, so we're out there without no insurance because the insurance company won't insure us until we get a CO. But when Gavin and I were figuring this, we knew we were close. And the best I could figure, we were gonna make it. But when I was asked to have somebody certify it was right, my surveyor did the calculations and we're 2.3% over. And, the city is one of the few places that have the impervious rule. In the county, you don't have a rule, you just have to retain your own water. And that's what we've done on this property, like we do on any property, regardless of where we build it. We're a good neighbor and we retain our own water. And we've accomplished that. The house has been in place with all the non-pervious areas for quite some time. And as y'all probably know, that rain we had a couple nights ago dumped 3.5 inches of water in 3 hours. And we didn't have any problems. And I didn't even notice any problems in the whole general area within a few miles of 27 Ferry Road. And we are only talking 2.3. But the rules are the rules, and this board was created to review it and see if it was going to be a big whoop-de-doo or not. And like I say, 2.3, you can sneeze and be off that much. We could get a different surveyor and survey it, he might come up with the 50%. It's a very, as you can see, with all the angles and jots, it's a little in the curve right there. It gets a little difficult to figure. And surveyors can be off a few inches here and there. And like I say, we have done a good job to retain our water. Yes, sir.
The red's already been poured, right?
The red or what?
It's already been poured. It's physically.
Oh, it's already poured, done. Grass is in.
When you guys poured it, did you put like a V in the middle of it?
We do that in the yard itself. We have sandy loam soil here and it perks very well. So we take advantage of the the pervious areas, and we put swales so we don't shed into the neighbor's yard and it has a chance to perk into the ground. Just the way we all, everybody does it that way. If an engineer was involved in that, he would draw the swells and say how deep they needed to be, but the city doesn't require that, and the county just comes out and looks at in general and sees that we have swells in place, and they kind of look at the history of the area too. Even though we are in a floodplain 9 or 10, and the house is built to the standards of the floodplain, everything's in place. And you know, in the city of Fort Long Beach, all these neighborhoods were established and plotted back when we built 1,400 square foot houses with 1-car garages. We pay $150,000 minimum for a lot now, our customers do, and citizens of Fort Walton Beach. And people want a 2,400 square foot house, and they want a 3-car garage. It's hard to do. These rules need to change to be more flexible for our citizens and our buyers. At the end of the day, we all work for the buyer. And I live, work, and play here. And I wouldn't do anything to this beautiful town to do anything to hurt my neighbors or my customers. And
Mr. Coates, if y'all decide to grant variance, you can always condition it on keeping
you gotta
the water
remember,
on the property.
So I got a question. So if, let's say hypothetically, 6 months down the road, there is a problem with one of the neighbors' yards, or it's flooding somewhere else because of the property, would you fix it?
well, you know, I know situations like that, and it is the right thing to do is fix it, but let's say we've had enough experience with that, and with this rain we had, 3.5 inches in 3 hours is a lot of rain. And as far, I was born and raised here, and I drive around a lot when they're raining. I don't know that area having standing water for any length of time, if not at all.
The question is, would you fix it?
The what?
The question was, would you fix it?
Oh, of course.
Because
We fixed many problems, not necessarily flood problems, but
I'll give you an example. I had a house builder built a house next door to my house. And I called that builder to fix they pulled a tree up and they broke my sprinkler system. Even though they didn't fix it, and you might be really familiar with this property, it's 100 Shell Avenue, Southeast.
I'm not exactly, I couldn't find my hearing aids before I left, but I think what you're saying is, from our standpoint, we fix everything we tear up or anything we do wrong. And in my position, since this is the way I make my living, I have to keep my good name and reputation, and most of the time it's not a big deal anyway. It's just part of another day at the office, just fix our problems. But we're very conscientious not to have problems. This is my daughter's house. If it's affecting the neighbors, it's generally would affect her too.
Well, the reason why I brought that up is because you built that house, it's 100 Shell Avenue Southeast. And if I live next door, and you did break my stuff, and I called you guys, and you guys didn't fix it. So that's why I'm kind of curious if you would fix that or not.
Again, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing much of what you say. I should be having my hearing aids on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just come over the microphone.
Yeah, come on, let's hear.
Mr. Wynn, I think you bring up a great point. And we've recently made some staffing changes within our company to where issues like yours are better addressed through our main line of defense, which is our front office. Because we did have some issues where situations like yours that we would love to remedy weren't making it to us because of those issues. And so we are taking matters to address that and take care of all of our customers and all of our adjacent property owners. Like you said, this is how we feed our families, and we take it very seriously.
But I think most of y'all know that the work that we do, our places look good, they're safe, our customers are happy, our neighbors are happy. For the most part, I believe you're as happy as you're gonna make them, but there's just some people, they got theirs, and they don't understand. We're just trying to get what they have already. the dream of owning your own home. But again, like I say, at the end of the day, we're only talking about 2.3%, and this rule is a blanket thing that covers everything. It's not using common sense that not all properties are the same, but they have the same rule. If we were in the county, there would be an administrative adjustment in place where Elliott Camper wouldn't have to talk to anybody. He can do it up to 10% himself. And I would like to see the city adopt some of these things where the administrative could do an administrative adjustment in-house without having to come before the board, because a lot of it's just, looking around, common sense, looking at the situation and seeing there's not going to be a flooding issue.
If I can interject on that one, the city does have a process for administrative waivers, and they can waive up to 10%. However, the way our code is written on that is they can waive up if a building permit has been issued and there's an error made in the installation, basically. So a lot of times we'll issue a permit, for example, with the house being set back 7.5 feet from the side of the property. But when it's built, they build the foundation at 7.5 foot. When you add the bricks onto it, they're a little bit out of that. And that's what that admin waiver process is used for in there, to waive that 10%. Staff did not feel that would be appropriate in this case, because it wasn't really a matter of there was an error made in the application at that point. It was just because these were whole new areas being added onto there. It didn't really fall into the intent of that part of the code.
And y'all can always inquire of the applicant if there actually was an error made on their part, because they haven't had a chance to testify to that fact yet.
So the backstory on this is that we did permit this home without this it's an RV pad. The red area is an RV pad, and then an extension to the rear porch. But we did permit this house without those things because Tracy and I were going to build this home as a spec house. And then whenever Olivia saw it going up, she said, "I want that one." So Tracy and I worked out a deal to make that happen for our girl. And so to clear the air a little bit, yes, the red area is an RV parking pad and then an extension to the rear porch. And as Tracy spoke on, I believe that him and I are both pretty competent builders. We created swells around the whole perimeter of the property to where we ensure that we retain our own water. And you brought up a good point about the concave of the driveway. We don't do that, just like Tracy said, so that the water has a chance to perk rather than running off onto the street or onto the adjacent property owner's property. And so just wanted to clear that up for y'all.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just curious.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard Tracy say he poured, so it's not cobblestone or whatever?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
This is residential concrete.
Okay. I watched the house go up. I just have to tell you, Mr. Tracy is one of the most wonderful builders in this
He is.
city. And you built a beautiful home on Ferry.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all.
How many square feet is the 2.3%?
It's
230 square feet?
It's
over?
about 229 square feet.
So that back patio, I mean, did I calculate that at about 280 square feet is what the back patio is?
I'm not sure on the particulars. We did the RV pad in accordance to the setbacks, and then we did the rear porch in accordance to the rule where we can go 10 foot into the rear setback without, we don't have the chance to ever cover it, but or close it in, but we did follow all of the rules there and ensured that we did so. Like Tracy said, we did the calculations ourselves, and we were under the 50%, but there is human error, and there could be different calculations from different people.
I was just wondering if it had been done in a paver instead of just that patio area.
So
then it would have been okay, it would have been pervious substrate.
I can't afford brick pavers. They're so expensive.
And it really depends on how the pavers are installed. the vast majority of pavers, especially, if they're the ones that are butted right up against each other, water still will roll right off of that. It doesn't tend to just percolate into the ground through those. Yes, there's a small gap in there, but the vast majority of water will just run off of it. Staff would not consider that to be pervious unless it's certified as pervious. There is pervious asphalt, pervious concrete out there that is available in those, but I mean, just your typical paver would not be considered pervious.
So technically, they could have poured just that patio area in a pervious concrete,
Yes.
and that would have been, if I calculated it, the 280 square foot, that would have taken it down.
Yes. Now, I mean, I don't want to play this off as you can just go buy a bag of pervious concrete. It's an entire process. That there's a substructure that has to be built into there. So it's a process to do the pervious concrete.
Pervious concrete is a much tougher building material
Yes.
to work with. It's much more expensive.
Right.
And like I said before, and like Tracy said, based on our own calculations, we were under the 50%, but we're taking the measures in place to keep what we have.
And I'll just say, I mean, I've worked with Tracy and Gavin, and I think we got a great working relationship, and I agree with the assessments. He does great work and stuff on this, and this is just one where we're on different sides because of the LDC with this thing. So I will say, as far as like using swales and stuff for our commercial developments, we're requiring them to have the engineered plans that show that all stormwater will be retained on site. We don't require anything along those lines for residential, just because we enforce the impervious limitations on there that kind of handle that on its own. We just don't have anything in our code to basically account for if you have those swales and things developed in the residential side of things.
The swales, though, I thought that just directed the water away from something. So where is the swale?
No, ma'am. So the swell retains the water so that the ground can perk the water. It has enough time to perk into the ground rather than running off onto the adjacent properties.
So is it forming like a little pool or something?
It's like a little ditch to where the water will stay there instead of going to Dr. and Mrs. Hill's property or any of the adjacent property owners. And I've spoken to all the, most of the adjacent property owners. I've spoken to Dr. and Mrs. Hill and asked them if there's any issues, please to let me know. And that's this gentleman and this lady over here. And nobody has exhibited to me that there's any issue with water runoff. And Tracy said the property has been here for multiple months.
If I may interject, if y'all do end up conditioning on them maintaining stormwater on their own property, or at least consistent with other properties in the city, and there's a code violation down the line through the code enforcement process, they can always, years down the line, they can maybe go back and change that 2.3% to come in compliance at that point in time, if y'all are concerned about it being built and forgotten about now. So if it did actually cause a flood issue down the line, but y'all need to condition your variance grant tonight on them maintaining the stormwater.
And it'd be very difficult to enforce, though, because it's like, what percentage of the stormwater runoff? I mean, because there's certain it's just going to happen naturally. I mean, the additional 2.3 it'd be virtually impossible to really enforce a condition along those lines of if it becomes a problem in the future. Because what would 50% look like versus what would 52.3% look like? It'd be virtually impossible to really assess that.
Well, I would like to speak on that issue as well. The city does have provisions within the Land Development Code that allow existing nonconformities to go over the maximum allowed impervious surface requirement. And then the city refers to that as a benign nonconformity, which means that it's not a matter of public safety and health. So the city has acknowledged that water, the impervious surface going over the maximum allowed impervious surface in certain situations with existing nonconformities, but not new construction, doesn't pose an issue. So I just wanted to add that there.
Tim, you made a comment about a 10% rule-ish, like
Yes.
Is that in the LDC?
That is in the LDC, but again, it's clarified in there that basically the building permit is issued for a certain thing. For example, in this case, if they'd have poured the driveway a foot too wide from what they permitted, we would consider that an error in the construction part of it in there. The problem with this one wasn't really that it was So it's not the 10% on there. I mean, if this had been permitted and the green area was gonna take them to exactly 50%, and then when they poured it, the sidewalk was a little wider than they had planned it, and it put them over that 50%. That's where we would have applied that 10%. There's a administrative waiver process for that is completely in-house, that we would have been able to run that on. But since this was the addition of entirely different areas, we didn't feel that that was appropriate for that.
I would like to add that in Chapter 8 of the Land Development Code, underneath the benign nonconformities, there is a 10% limit on the variances allowed for setbacks and other things. But impervious surface is the only one that doesn't have a 10% limit. It has an infinite limit.
And for that one, I mean, he's absolutely correct on that one, and things, and that's where we do go into those with the benign nonconformities and stuff, because the encroachment into setbacks is absolutely more critical than the impervious that's there. The reason we don't really restrict any of the existing nonconformities for the impervious is because if it's been there for years and years and years, we would know if it's causing flooding effects and some things like that. With these new constructions, we just don't know necessarily if this will have an impact on there. And for the existing nonconformities that are out there, the one thing we don't let them do is basically if they're gonna tear it up, we won't let them put it back. You can't increase it. So if you're sitting at like 60% impervious, or in this case, if they're sitting at 52.3% impervious in the project, we wouldn't let them add onto this at all. And if they were to tear some of it up and then come back and say, I want to add it back now, we would not let them, because you brought it into compliance at that point in time.
Right.
And for redevelopments, you know, that's one of the things we make them show in there, that, you know, and they can still exceed it. Because if they're saying, if like a commercial property is at like 80% impervious, and then they're gonna go in there, they're gonna tear down the entire property and rebuild, and they're gonna end up at 77% impervious. They're still over the limit, but they've gotten better. And that's where that code does allow for that.
And like Tim said, the encroachment on the setbacks does pose a bigger issue, and we are in accordance with all setbacks and rules in the Land Development Code. Any other questions? Or thank you all. I appreciate y'all's time.
And I think there are members of the public here, if you want to take their
All right,
comments.
if anybody else would like to make any comments? Support.
Yeah, in the back to the classes. You guys know.
Really? I mean, if they want to.
Oh, you need to come up to the microphone.
He has not been sworn in.
And we're done with the evidentiary portion of the, this is now the public comment section. So. And please state your name for the record, sir.
Yep.
And before you actually do that, are you intending on providing testimony or just public comment?
So I'm in the homeowner.
Are you intending on providing public comment or testimony?
Testimony, sir.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
Okay, you're on the road. And you can give your name now.
My name is Enrique Roldan. I'm the homeowner on 303 Ohio Place. It's directly behind said house. I really just have, the one thing I will say is, if anyone wants to come to my house on any rainy afternoon, you'll see my entire backyard is now submerged under about 4.5 to 5 inches of water. And it goes from the fence line all the way to my back door. I'm already seeing cracks in the concrete, cracks in the sides of my building. So when it rains, you can just drive by my house, you'll see it's submerged underwater from the backyard, all the way from the fence line, all the way to the front door, or to the back door, sir.
Was this before or after?
This is after the house went up, sir.
Or if we didn't have any flooding issue?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
There's a question.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
the house that's been built, I would say beside your house?
There are 2 houses that are new developments. There is one to the right, that's the corner lot, and there's one directly behind it. Both houses sit above my current property, and before, when it rained, there was no issues. Now every time it rains, for example, 2 days ago when it was raining all day, my entire backyard and front yard are now being submerged underwater. So for complete transparency, I'm having to look at potentially selling my house because I'm in the military and I'm gone all the time, and I can't afford to lose an investment like that coming down and being submerged underwater.
Where are you at?
I'm at 303.
Which would be where on this, what side?
Lot 24.
Someone might order me to where the current lot is, but I am the property.
We'll bring up the GIS so that you can actually see the map and everything on here for the city GIS.
25.
Northeast.
I reside in 303.
So that's it, okay.
That is not the current structure.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It's a beautiful home, for the record.
Well, sir, I mean, I live in the neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
And I've watched the house on the corner build up. I know he demucked it, and he built it up and up. The other house, I don't remember seeing the builder do any kind of building up the lot. He built on what was there.
No, ma'am, because in my backyard, my neighbors now can see into every aspect of my home. And
I
prior to
didn't-
that wasn't the case.
I didn't catch what you said.
The home now,
Yeah.
if you walk into my backyard, ma'am,
Uh-huh.
the home that is where the blue tarp is at on the image right there, that home can see entirely into my backyard and into my house now, when before that wasn't the case.
But it's a two-story home.
Yeah, ma'am, but I can see into their living room from my backyard.
Because they raised it.
Yes, ma'am.
We do see this throughout the city fairly often. So when FEMA changes the floodplains or our flood maps. So in 2016, FEMA released some new preliminary flood maps. If you want to bring up the flood, yeah, on there. We started regulating to these maps, but it wasn't actually official maps from FEMA there, so we couldn't. We could regulate to them, making sure that they're building at the appropriate heights. But basically, a lot of these areas with this 2016 map were added into the floodplain. So any construction you might have seen happening in like 2015, they may have not been in a floodplain at all. And then a month later, FEMA releases these new maps, and then we require people to build to that AE9. And an example of the 27 Ferry address, they're actually built per their elevation certificate at 11 feet. So the top of their floor, of their first floor, is at 11 feet above sea level. This is where you'll see around the city, sometimes you'll even see where like one house is just built up on a hill, is because it's a new house. And that's just because there was the changes in the floodplain that the houses that were constructed in, 2015 or even, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whenever, they just weren't in the floodplain at that time. So that's why you will see sometimes these big disparities over houses being built up.
When they build it up, was there any concessions that they have to make sure the other houses don't flood?
So, like I said, with the commercial properties, we make them give engineered plans that show that all the stormwater will be maintained on there. There's no restriction for that on residentials, but that's where the impervious limitation comes on there. It is standard NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program requirements too, though, that you can't deflect like flood waters and stuff. So I will agree 100% with them. They've done the swells. They're trying to keep the property and stuff on there. Had they built this thing basically on a hill so that everything would wash off, that would have been a bigger issue per the NFIP, because now you're purposely directing your flood water off of your property.
You said there was another house that was built prior to that house?
Yeah, 301.
Were you seeing flooding after they built that house, or?
A little bit on the side as well, but my backyard is fully submerged when it rains now. So both houses sit above my house, but my backyard is the one that concerns me because it's completely submerged.
Are you required to have flood insurance?
I am, sir. My premium went up
Because you're in a
$1,000.
floodplain.
Yeah.
Yeah, any property that's in the special flood hazard area, or that AE9s or whatever, unless it is a outright owned, if you have a mortgage on it, you're required to carry federally backed flood insurance.
Yeah, well, in there, there's another house that was
Pardon me?
built on that corner property. Yeah, what was that elevation change? Because if I recall, it took like a year almost to fill that property in.
I don't have any details on that corner
So
property.
it seemed like it was filled a good bit, because it was like a sink, or just water. It was almost like a little lake for a long time.
Yeah.
So it was like maybe a natural drainage area, like a low point.
Yeah, y'all have a chance to speak. He's at the podium right now.
We own that house that she's got a question.
Okay, y'all have
Oh, the 301, okay.
I didn't know if you knew.
I don't have any details on that house.
But you're saying that, so you live next door to the new house on the corner?
I live on 303, ma'am.
That's that house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so in the,
And I am here today on behalf of the flooding that's being caused from 27th Ferry. Because my backyard, like I said, if you look at that as that image stands, from where the mouse cursor is, right where it's at, all the way to the line to your left, ma'am, all that area is now submerged underwater.
what about on the other side? So you're saying just the back to the blue tarp house?
Yes, ma'am. So it starts here and it comes all the way down
Oh,
here.
okay, to this side too. Do you before the house was built, where would the water drain, or did you have noticed water sit anywhere before?
Yeah, along where the tree line is, right there to the left of that mouse cursor, ma'am.
That's where you would have water?
That's where we had water prior, just because it was a natural, like, collection area in that empty lot for so long.
Two percent.
And then I do believe the folks in the back wanted to now make some comments. I'll ask them if they want to be sworn in and do it on the testimonial side, or if they want to wait to public comment. Do you all want to provide some testimony?
Sure, if they have any questions.
And sir, you'll get more chance to speak.
Got questions about that?
Can you come up to the microphone? And just raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and just say your name and address for the record.
Thomas Hills, current address is 114 Alden Drive in Fort Walton Beach. And we bought the property at 301 Ohio Place or 25 Ferry Road, depending on which way you face the house. We face it to Ohio Place, so that's it. And to answer the question about before we could put the foundation in, we had to rise it up to 42 inches or 48 inches or something like that in order to be able to build. And we had to demuck the lot, as you saw that going by. We didn't realize that when we bought the lot, but in various places on the lot, there was, underneath the ground, there was muck. So it did take a lot of dirt to take the muck away and fill it in, but then we met the required whatever inches it was, 42 inches above.
The base flood elevation.
Base level, there you go, to put the foundation. And the lot has large setbacks, huge setbacks that are not normal for drainage and stuff. We didn't realize that. We thought we'd be able to build a bigger home. And because of the drainage setbacks between the Acreage house and ours, there's a big setback. We can't put any concrete or anything. And then next to, there you go. So you have the normal city right of way, and then the big the green one next to the blue tarps was an area we couldn't build because of a drainage situation, which I presume is what they were talking about.
But there's none in between your house and the other house on Ohio, because that's where he said there was normal water collection, but there's not.
That's the normal setback line that you have between houses normally, and I would have thought that would have been the same setback line next to the blue tarp, but because of the drainage assessment, it wasn't. So it made our building area possible, our foundation space much smaller. It's a beautiful lot, a very large lot, but when you look at the giant setbacks all around, it makes a small footprint possible.
And to clarify, those are easements
Easements, I'm sorry.
from the city and stuff. So they're still private property, but the the city doesn't allow structures to be built on the easements. Flat work is allowed, like driveways, sidewalks, those types of things to go across easements, but structures are not allowed.
And just so it doesn't kind of spiral down a rabbit hole here, the city did permit everything other than the driveway, correct? So it made,
Yes.
this project went through any drainage conditions that have to be met, and the only
100%,
issue is
yeah.
the 2.3% of the driveway.
That is correct. 27 Ferry, the house meets all setbacks, everything is all set up, everything is all ready.
Are there any
Ma'am,
any other questions we can help with and all that? The other thing we were concerned with is we hadn't gone through one of these areas before, we're curious, and didn't know as far as, you know, future problems, if there was a problem with water runoff, if there's something we could do in the future. That was the other thing. Okay.
and I just wanted to point that out about the city did approve of everything, so that would not be the fault of the owners at this point, anything that the city has already approved of.
That's correct.
Well, actually, you'll get a chance for rebut, Mr. Ray. Do you have any further questions for any of the?
So how do we fix this?
Okay, so Mr. Aker wants to provide some rebuttal, I believe, to the witnesses that have testified.
As far as his water situation, before we tore the house down and built the house that we built, and before they built their house, and as he testified that they had to demuck, not only did they have to demuck, but their land was 2 feet below the crown of the road, so lower. So if what was happening all these years, why he didn't have any water in his yard, is his water and his neighbor's waters came over there to our side and perked to the ground, and also in their hole. There was water standing on their property because it was a retention pond. So, you know, water goes to its lowest point. Now, the water cannot go into our yard or their yard to perk. That water that's standing in his yard is his water that came off of his property and his roof. And he's built way back many years ago, and he's so much lower than us, and, you know, we're a more planned development to handle our water and have our retention ponds. No matter what we do, if we just didn't ever built nothing but a wall across there to keep water out, he would be flooded now, still. He would flood that day, the day a wall was put up. But we're higher than him, so he's gonna take, he doesn't, his water was coming over there and perking because we were the lowest ground. Now we don't retain his water or any of the other neighbors. I'm sure they're getting their own water in their yard now because they're low. But we are retaining our water just as well as they're retaining their water. Their builder was very conscious. I watched them, their builder build it, and we're all responsible for our own water. And less than 3%, when we take out that 3%, it ain't gonna bring his water level down. No, it's not gonna affect it. We can take the house out and just build a wall up there to keep his water from coming over there, and he's still gonna have the same amount of water. You know, we're downhill from him before it all started. But like I say, it don't matter how much we take out, it's not gonna solve the problem. We were helping them before we built the house because we were taking the water. And I experience that all the time on properties that I build on, that we're currently taking on other people's water, but once we don't take on their water anymore, we're not helping them. And we can't help them by taking out the 2.3%. It ain't gonna help them. It's not gonna help them a bit. It's not gonna solve the problem. He's got a lot of water coming in there, obviously, since he's here talking about it, but it's not gonna fix the problem. Not 2.3%. And we can't fix the problem.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Aker?
I have no more questions.
Does staff have any rebuttal to?
Thank you.
And so I
All right,
guess that's the end of the testimonial phase, and I guess just for the record, so it's clear, if you want to ask if there's anyone in the public.
Do we, no, anybody else want to make any comments? Do we want to Make a motion.
So is the motion to approve the 2.3% yes or no?
Effectively, if you,
However you word
however
it.
you want to word it, you can also add conditions that they
Approve
keep
the
water on if
variance.
you want to, like we suggested earlier. But it's the, if you approve the variance, if you make the motion to approve the variance request, then it will allow the 2.3% additional.
All right, are you making a motion? Do we have a motion? Anybody? Nobody's gonna make a motion?
I'll make a motion that, we consider the 2 point whatever it is and allow the, builder to keep his property as it is now. We're gonna accept the 52.3.
Okay.
So you're moving to approve
Move
of
to approve
the
it.
variance.
All right, and a second? I'll second it.
And that also included, you did reference, it includes all the factors. Ms.
Yeah.
Glover, you.
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry.
And before you all actually vote or do any further deliberation, just because there was one bit of ex parte evidence brought in by a board member, I just have to do a quick question to that board member, just so they can vote. And that'd be Mr. Tom. You did indicate earlier that you had experience with the applicant. Is that correct?
Correct.
And will you be able to base your decision tonight solely on the evidence that you've heard here tonight and not on any of your previous experience?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, yep. All right, motion carries 6-2. Guess I don't need this. Okay, variance is approved, 6-2. And I guess we're moving on to ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is ordinance number 2146, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 5 of the Land Development Code for supplemental standards for storage buildings, storage sheds, greenhouses, and detached garages or carports, providing for authority, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This is a quasi-legislative hearing. I believe Mr. Gibson's providing on behalf of the staff.
So the background on this one, over the past several years, we've started receiving more and more permit applications in for people to take shipping containers and put them up on the property.
Ma'am, do you mind going outside? Thank you.
So yeah, we've been seeing more applications come in for shipping containers to be put onto properties and used as storage. Essentially, we've seen this in both residential and commercial. It's been more in the commercial side, but we've actually seen a bigger uptick in this recently on the residential side. Right now, we don't have anything in our land development code regarding shipping containers. LDC section 5.1.2 does provide general guidance for all accessory structures. And in that section, it outlines like setback requirements, height requirements, and all that kind of stuff in there. And then further in section 5.1.7, there's guideline for storage buildings, storage sheds, greenhouses, and detached garage or carports. However, it doesn't go into any kind of specific guidelines for actual shipping containers that are going to be used as a storage building in there. With this uptick in them, staff felt it was good to go ahead and try to get some standards out there for, you know, kind of what they would have, how they would have to be applied in here. With that, we did look out to a bunch of different neighboring jurisdictions and really all across the state of Florida to kind of look and see how they were regulated across the state for these in there. Some of them were extremely restrictive. Some of them just straight up said no in any residential areas. Some of them really didn't provide much guidance at all other than to say that they were allowed. So it really kind of ran the gamut of what we were looking at in there. We did take and go through, all those different regulations and kind of do our own research and thoughts on these things as well, and came up with, and sorry, it says in your staff report that there's 8 criteria. Through the review process, a few more were added, so right now it's up to 13 criteria that are in there. Now these are all, kind of standalone items in there as well. So if there's something in these 13 items that you're like, I really don't think that's right, or something that's like, no, that needs to be harsher, these can be made changes to and stuff in there throughout this one. So I just want to make sure that you understand that all of those, if this is basically, it can come with a recommendation that it's approved, the recommendation to City Council that's approved as written, or you could even make recommendations that, hey, we delete this particular requirement and then make that recommendation to council on there. Now for the actual ordinance changes in there, there's a few kind of administrative stuffs in sections 8 through, or subparagraphs 8 through E of this. Really just adding kind of in shipping containers where it talks about storage buildings, storage sheds, and stuff into that language of those codes. And specifically in here that it can't be located with any kind of required buffer area, landscape areas, required parking, lot landscaping, stormwater management area, driveway easements. That's just kind of standard for all accessory structures in there. And then not really pertaining to the shipping containers, but just since we were in here and making a change to this, just kind of an administrative change just to kind of clarify for some of the vehicles not being allowed to be used for storage. Again, just to kind of clarify a few things in that section. Now, the big part of this is going to be section F that provides a definition for what a shipping container is. And then it talks about them that shipping containers shall only be used as an accessory structure storage buildings and no other use whatsoever per the following standards in addition to those listed above in sections A through E. And I'd like to clarify one thing on that one. This is under the subsection for storage buildings and stuff. So shipping containers can actually be converted into businesses. There's some, we actually have one shipping container home in the city that they were kind of welded together and modified and into an actual home. Those would still be allowed in there. Those just fall under Florida Building Code and would fall under the accessory dwelling section and not under the accessory structure section for storage buildings. So that would be allowed under there. But for the shipping containers in here, the criteria we outlined in here was that it shall comply with Florida Building Code, Florida Fire Prevention Code, and shall require a building permit to be installed. Next was that it's on its own dedicated permanent foundation and not stacked on top of any other buildings or structures. We did put in here a restriction to no more than one shipping container shall be installed per property. And again, this is shipping containers used for storage out there. Next, we added that it cannot be located with any required off-street parking spaces, vehicle driveways, drive aisles, fire lanes, or pedestrian facilities. This is obviously for our commercial ones. What we don't want to do is, we have our restrictions in our code for our parking spaces required per business. We didn't want to see one of these kind of sitting across 3 parking spaces, and now that company doesn't have enough parking spaces that they require. Next is that they shall be painted and maintained in good condition at all times with no visible structural damage, corrosion, or graffiti. Like that's kind of self-explanatory in there. We didn't want, because some of these things are used shipping containers that, have the big logos on the side of them and could be, rusted or whatever. They'll have to obviously be cleaned up, freshly painted, and everything in there to be used. Next was that shipping container was visible from a right-of-way shall be screened with side obscuring fencing or landscaping. This is one that honestly, I'll just be frank, staff did debate back and forth on because frankly, some of these shipping containers can look very, very nice. And we don't have a restriction for like a storage building, which may not look so nice. Those are not required to be screened, but right now as it's written, we require screening of the shipping containers. Again, these can be modified as needed. Next on this one was that shipping containers are prohibited within the community redevelopment area. Again, this is kind of a harsher stance on this one in the CRA. That did come from a recommendation from our CRA administrator, who did recommend that we do prohibit them in there. The whole community redevelopment area is designed to eliminate slum and blight. And she just kind of felt that the, you know, allowing these shipping containers in there necessarily would not kind of contribute to, you know, making the areas look nicer. Next is that the shipping container shall not be permitted for any advertising purpose or shall not be, and shall be kept clean of all alphanumeric signage and written, except where markings, labels, placards and stuff may be required. Again, this is just, we want them to look nice. We don't want to have, you know, big billboards, advertisements and stuff on there. We do have sign code restrictions and stuff that would have to go through on there. Next are some of the ones that were added in there, and specifically stating that shipping containers shall not be installed or located in front yards. Most accessory structures, they just have to meet the setback restrictions on there. So if you have, you know, residential property, the front setback is 25 foot. If, say, your house is set back 30 foot, you could theoretically have a storage building in your front, but this would not allow the shipping containers to be in the front of your house. Next is that shipping containers shall not be used as habitable space or rented out for any use. Again, to stress, this is for the storage ones. What we don't want to do is these storage containers go in and then somebody converts them into an accessory dwelling unit and starts renting them out to there. And that kind of ties in with the next one, with mattresses and beds shall not be stored or located with the shipping container. You know, obviously staff is not going to be out there going door to door, you know, inspecting the, you know, the contents of someone's storage shed. But this is really just kind of in there to kind of stress the fact that these are not to be used. You know, somebody could be like, oh, I'm not actually living there. I'm just storing my bed and a nightstand and a lamp and it's just to kind of really deter that being converted into a residential dwelling in there. And the same thing for it, you know, not being hooked up to any water, sewer, utility, or septic tank system. Again, if we're going to have these, it's for storage only and not for residential purposes. And then finally, they shall be installed so that the longer side of the shipping container lies flat against its foundation. And like I said, those are the 13. If we want to discuss individual ones or however from there.
What does that mean, that last?
You can't stand it on its end.
It can't be set on its inside, it can't be a diagonal, it has to be on flat on its bottom.
So I have a couple of questions on this. It cannot be installed in a CRA district.
If that's written, yes.
But the CRA district changes. So you may have one as long as you're currently not in, and then you'd be grandfathered in?
That what would be considered an existing nonconformity, similar to what we discussed with the variance in there. That if it was there and then it became, you know, that's going to be even right now. If there's a shipping container in the CRA currently, and then this is enacted, that becomes an existing nonconformity.
See, I have a terrible problem with that because I fight the CRA money where it goes, because I've had different properties that have asked for CRA money, but it's all used up for the band shell. So what CRA money was originally, in my understanding, was to help promote better neighborhoods and sidewalks, and we're not getting that because that money is captured for the band shell. So these neighborhoods just keep going down and down and down.
I'm not sure.
Well,
I'm not
because
understanding what you're saying, the money's captured for.
money has already been designated, a
Okay.
lot of the CRA money from, now maybe it's changed this year, but it wasn't changed last year with everybody coming in. So I'm having a little bit of an issue of saying CRA district on this. The other thing that I don't understand is when it says they're not to be used for automobiles. Where was that? E? Letter E?
So yeah, this whole section deals with storage
So who
of both,
monitors
and not
that?
just shipping containers.
Who monitors that? So you're not gonna let somebody put a bed, a headboard and a footboard and a springs in there and shut the door?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Again, that's something we can't really, you know, we're not going to inspect or anything
Absolutely
along
not.
those lines, but it's just really.
That is just asking for trouble, because what you're doing is you're giving an impasse to somebody and then you're just gonna take the nosy neighbor that's gonna demand you go in there and check all of these, and they're gonna say what's fair for one is fair for all. That's my theory anyway. So I'm thinking you're giving them criteria now that says pretty soon we're gonna tell you what you can store in your attic or your garages or things like that. So I'm not altogether happy with what the criteria is, and it sounds like some people want others to live like they want them to live.
And as much as, I mean, this can be a matter of if the board doesn't like that criteria or other criteria or those criteria you think should be in there, that's what we can entertain here.
I don't think
go
that-
forward to city council with a recommendation that this be approved, but line out, you know, line number 3, 4, and 9.
I think item 11 isn't necessary, you're covering it in the first one, or in 10. Shipping containers shall not be used as if it habitable space or rented out.
Period.
So, yeah, okay.
What people did.
Yeah.
Can we define what a storage container is? Because I mean, or shipping container is, because we
It does.
isn't.
Yeah,
was
doesn't
there
it say
already-
in the song?
Divided in
It's,
letter action.
Okay.
I don't know why.
It's somewhere in there. I
Okay,
know I've
there it
read
is.
Yeah.
We can table this also to bring it back to next meeting.
That's correct.
Well, if you do table it, it actually will still go to council, even if you table it, so. It won't hold it up going
So
to council.
why are we here?
For this process, the LPA exists to provide public notice to folks to come in and provide more input and to provide recommendations to the council.
Okay, so no matter how we vote.
But the thing you just handled, the variance request, y'all made a final decision on that. But for ordinances, you make a recommended decision to the council. If you don't make an actual decision on an ordinance, the council still can then move forward and take up the issue, because the LPA only is required to hear it and make a recommendation. If they recommend and table it, then it won't hold up the process.
So as a member of this committee, can we speak to the city
You can,
during
yeah,
that
yes,
meeting
yes,
and
ma'am.
just clarify who we are?
Yes, you
and why
can
we
go to the
want
council
it?
meeting. Tonight, you can also make a motion to maybe remove portions
Yeah.
of it, and that's your recommended motion, that we remove, sections 1 through 5 or something like that of subsection F. And that's our recommended motion. If y'all make that recommendation, that will go to council that y'all think that should be removed. But you can also you have every right to show up at the city council meeting and also speak on the issue.
Well, I just think we need to be very careful how we ask people to live like we want them to live.
Well, let's just take
and
that
not-
one out then. I mean, like,
And make sure that we are very open to the way these containers can be used, if we're gonna allow them at all.
Yeah, and I mean, and like you said, I mean, I don't understand why we're putting all these restrictions on here when we don't do that for everything else.
I have a question. What were the reasons that the lady pulled out the CRA area? What were her reasons?
Again, it's just more for the aesthetics of the area, as I understand it from her.
And we're not
The
spending money
aesthetics
there.
of the area, it is such an area that it would probably really be a place that these things would probably be used.
It could be.
I mean, look at the,
They really can be. Again, we looked at a lot of different
look at
ones.
the Gulf restaurant, the Gulf
Yeah,
restaurant
all
was made
of
of
it.
entirely shipping containers. And it looks nice, the Gulf restaurant on the island. It's all
but
shipping
it can
containers.
be, but we're not saying that you can't use shipping containers. This is just using it as a
storage.
storage unit.
It's a
You can
shed.
still,
Build-
if you can still use one to build a home if you wanted to,
Oh.
but you have to go through home.
Sure.
These are
You
strictly
have to
for
go
the
through
shipping. I mean, I just looked
the
at
permitting on that.
I can see what you're saying.
So I have a question on that. So say I buy a shipping container, I put it in my backyard, I pull it as a permit for a shed. 5 years down the road, I'm like, I am taking everything out of there and I'm gonna turn that into a mama-in-law suite. What is stopping me from doing that?
I mean, really, it's nothing. But that's the same thing that you could do with the storage building and stuff. I mean, you're
Do I have to pull
required
out?
to put permits for the electrical, for the sewage, for the water connections
Okay.
and all that sort of stuff, but.
So then it would
if
be
you
denied,
don't,
it would be
then
denied off of that.
That is correct. It would be denied to be turned into an accessory dwelling.
Gotcha.
But
Well,
how can you do
there's a,
that?
well,
Well, it could be converted.
there is a process to turn it into an accessory dwelling, so there is a process to do that, exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's separate from this ordinance right here. This is just to prevent people from trying to skirt underneath and turn their shed into a VRBO or Airbnb and not actually go through the process, so the city doesn't know about it. So the city doesn't know also tell the tax collector about it, so they're
Right.
doing their due diligence, paying their taxes.
But in an R1 area, the zoning is such that you can have only one tap on a lot.
That's correct.
Well, then how can you, 5 years later, make your little container into a mother-in-law suite? Because you've gotta have a commode in that.
Yeah, it still happens right now. I mean, for our R1, R1E properties, they're allowed to have an accessory dwelling on the property. They cannot have it permitted separately. You have to have one water account, one electric account. We won't give it a separate address or a separate tap for it, but you can tie in, like the principal house, you could tie in the sewer and water and electric from that house into the accessory dwelling.
Oh, you can?
That is allowed. There's restrictions on it. I mean, there's a whole section of our code for accessory dwellings in the code and the requirements they have to meet and some stuff like that. There's residential design standards. There's a lot of things like that, but that's what it's saying. I mean, if these were to be converted into a residential dwelling, it would have to go through review to make sure it complies with all of those requirements.
But
It
it's
could be
still
done,
one
but
tap.
for this, it wouldn't be allowed.
It'd be one tap.
That's correct.
One bill.
Yes.
They couldn't divide it or anything.
Well, it's one tap.
One tap.
Yes. What they do with it once, I mean, it'll be one tap into the sewer, one tap into the water, and then it should run internally on there from there. Now, there are 2 multifamily properties. Those can have the multiple addresses, multiple bills, multiple taps.
Well, I'm not happy about the CRA area being pulled out. I'd like to know her reasons.
I mean, and that's why I try to stress this right at the get-go, that a lot of these were in here, and if it's a matter of you as a board don't like that restriction in there, just bring that part as your recommendation, and we'll provide. Now, when this goes to city council, what's written here will be what's presented, but then it will be presented with, this came from the LPA with a recommendation that these lines be stricken from it. But as the ordinance written is what will be presented to them. But then it will be announced that you guys recommended that certain things be deleted.
Well, I recommend that we pull the CRA line out.
And I'll keep track as y'all go through, and then when y'all get ready to make a motion, I'll see if y'all want to make a motion suggesting all of them. So I've made note of that as well.
E, F, and 7 and 11 should come
I
out.
mean, would it be beneficial to maybe just start line by line and see what kind of the group thought?
Maybe board member by board member, maybe, just to.
Oh, that's, yeah, however.
Ms. Albright, which do you have any items you don't want?
I can strike, the CRA, so number 7. What can be stored in them, number 11. So number 7 and number 11,
Okay.
we'll strike those.
Mr. Coates?
I am good with those same ones.
Ms. Glover, you already said number 7. Do you have any others?
I don't have any.
Okay.
I think 7 and 11 need to come out, and I'm not crazy about rented out for any use. What if I want rented out for storage?
You're making a commercial property.
Well, I mean, he wants to store whatever his furniture while he's moving in it for a couple months.
You gonna rent it to him and he's your buddy?
Maybe he's not my buddy, maybe he's my neighbor.
I'll say that,
I mean, it
the
just
intention
seems like
kind of
if you're
behind
saying-
it was to limit these.
Is there a second to number 10? Because we have multiple seconds to 7 and 11. Does anyone else agree with Mr. McPherson on number
When you
10?
say any,
I would
just
say
think
commercial rented. If you're renting to your buddy, that's not commercial.
No.
That's a handshake deal, right? So I
Well,
would say-
that's why because it says any use, any whatsoever.
Any business use?
I think
Yeah,
so.
that's-
Yeah, the word business, would you be okay adding the word business?
Commercial?
Yeah,
Commercial.
Yeah, commercial use. So it seems there are a lot of head nods on adding commercial use into number 10. So striking 7, striking 11, add commercial into number 10. Anything else, Mr. McPherson?
No, that's.
Ms. Kincaid?
I'm trying to struggle with E and F.
So if I can.
Well, now, first off, on
Everything
E,
that I
just
can.
so for clarification, E already exists.
Alright.
And the only additions to E
E
are
is
going to
that.
be the underlying portions to say but are not limited to, and then they added vans and boats. Or did I do that?
So what if I put wheels on it, the vehicle?
And I just have to state again that the reason that you want to not get so nitpicky is everybody's going to circumvent and do whatever they want. I mean, for that, but,
I mean, and that's where, I mean, like I said, I mean, this was, you know, we kind of took, there was the gamut of everything from absolutely no anywhere, period, dot, to, yeah, do whatever you want with them, kind of thing. And that's where we just kind of took the list of, hey, here's some of the restrictions that are out there. Like I said, even internally with staff, the stuff about like, you know, having it, you know, shielded from view via fencing or landscaping and stuff. That was like, well,
What about
you know,
this
you
dedicated?
can have a horrible looking storage shed that we allow not to be screened, but you can have an amazing looking shipping container that we're making you screen. So again, it's really kind of whatever we want to go with out there. This was really just to present it to you to say, what do you feel as the community
and again,
members
you have the
for
right
that?
point taken, is that we do have junky storage sheds, and they look like crap, and they're falling down, but that's okay, but a shipping container painted isn't.
And if we don't mind coming back to you, Ms. Kincaid, because you still seem like you're formulating all your items. Ms.
They're
Moss, do you have
taken.
any additional items?
No.
Not at this point, no.
Mr. Nguyen?
Does this have any, I guess, because a storage container is pretty big, so does that take a percentage of, you know, the land use?
I'm sorry, what?
Like, the shipping containers are pretty big.
Impervious surface.
There we go.
Oh, well, you're gonna have to put on a foundation.
Yes.
It says permanent foundation, but can that can be gravel or no?
I believe that the intent is for it to be a concrete or some sort of permanent foundation like that, not necessarily
The purpose
gravel,
of putting
but it would be
shipping
considered
container
impervious.
Okay.
If I'm putting concrete down, that kind of.
And that's a lot due to, I mean, it could be tied down through, other methods and stuff, but it really becomes kind of more for the building code and stuff, making sure these things are able to be tied down.
So if it's on a concrete, so it'd have to be on a concrete pad?
On a permanent foundation, the way.
There are some alternatives.
Yeah.
I
There
know
are.
some sheds,
Some are built.
in other cities I represent, you can put them on sort of like these
Just skids?
raised skids.
Yeah.
And similar things like
Do
that.
they have to be anchored down?
It'll depend on what the Florida building code requires for
Okay.
them.
I think
And
those
that's why we
sheds have
just
to
put in
be-
a generic thing in there, because right now they may not be required. Next year, they update the building code. I really just kind of wanted to go with whatever the building code requires for them.
And that's what you said in here, right?
That is
Yeah,
correct.
So, yeah, on number one.
That's
Yep.
at number one.
I'm just
Yeah.
making sure.
It seems to me you're making this a permanent structure when
Right.
the whole purpose of it is kind of a temporary structure. If I want to take it and move it, I can.
We have a process already in there for the temporary use of these. And that's still in there, and there's a process for that. They can be permitted. They're there to be temporary use. There's restrictions on how long they can be there and all that kind of stuff for those temporary ones. Those are more for, you know, like the only one I'm thinking of is pods,
Yeah.
where you can rent it for a couple of months and then they drop it in your front yard store if you're redoing your floors or whatever. There's a process already for those. These are what we're seeing now is people want to put this in their backyard as an alternative to building an actual metal building or stick built, you know, storage building.
I think it's a full permit to put a pod in my driveway.
Yes.
Whoops.
And real quick, I guess, because I was trying to get everyone's list first, and did you have anything?
The only thing I was worried about, because I don't know the Florida building codes. I don't know if it required an anchor or not, because we live in a hurricane-prone area.
I recently, at least in Destin, they told me I had to for a client, and so we got a variance. And they did require, there was a shed that had been out there that was permitted, but I was able to get a variance, but they required it to be anchored to be compliant with the building code. That was their interpretation. My client didn't mind, so we didn't challenge that issue, so I don't know if that's the actual code.
That's all I want to know, because if that thing floats away and hits another house,
Good luck on moving that thing.
It's probably a little anyway, so
I don't know. I don't know what something could happen.
maybe a class fire or a tornado.
Tornado, who knows?
I will say these things are very heavy.
Yeah.
These things flying around, so it's wool.
And I guess because you're out there too, do you have anything? Okay. And so I think, just so y'all know, so far we have 7 and 11, yank them and add commercial for use at number 10. So we're out for any commercial use. And then Ms. Kincaid, we'll come back to you if you had anything.
No, I'll give.
So I agree with your site obscuring fence, or sorry, not that one.
The landscaping,
The painting it or whatever
Yeah.
the term is for that. Why are we requiring it for that and not for sheds?
Well, and that's was going to be my point. Anything we require for a shed
Should be
should
required.
be here, but it shouldn't
Which
go
one is
above a shed.
That's how I was trying to figure out
What we
which one it
require
was.
for,
So that would be
What
number 6.
number?
I believe
Well, it's
you're
visible
referring to.
from the right of way, so that just means if you don't have a fenced, if you have a fenced in yard, you're meeting that.
number 6.
Number
Maybe,
6.
maybe we should go back to the code for sheds too and just say they should be well maintained. I mean, if we have a problem with
That's
dilapidated
not what
sheds.
this is, though.
I don't know.
And there is, code enforcement does go out for those, as they become aware of them for maintenance, of their structures and stuff, so. Yeah.
so there already for sheds, there is some type of comparable,
There
Yeah,
is,
verbiage
yeah.
for,
I mean,
like,
it
keep
depends.
maintaining them.
It comes down to an interpretation of what is a not maintained structure.
Yeah.
But that's where the code board or the special magistrate would get involved in that one,
Okay.
to determine whether it needs to be repaired or not.
Define shabby chic. We're not all in accordance with 6, so.
And was there a recommendation to try to go back in and update the entire section to put the same requirements for all structures, not shipping containers?
That's what I would say, just make sure all buildings are the same, you know, whatever the shed requirement is for viewing from the front of the property, it needs to be the same for the shipping container. So
Right now, there's no requirement to shield, storage buildings.
Maybe
Yeah,
we should ask them to go back
Then-
and address that.
Then if you take out 6 and they ask why, that would be our answer. And then if they want to do that, then they can correct it. But right now, if a shed doesn't need to be obscured, then a storage container should.
Like I said, this was one that we absolutely had internal discussions back and forth on, and that was kind of one side of this is we're already saying it's gotta be painted, it's gotta be neat, it can't be rusted. Well, why do we have to hide that then? You know, if we're gonna make you hide it, then why do we care what it looks like?
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
so
So,
6
you know,
needs
that
to
was
go.
absolutely internal.
So take 6 up.
6, 7, add to 10 and get it 11 out.
So which sentence can you,
6, 7,
and add the 10 and then take out 11?
11 out.
Okay, so just take out 6 times 7, okay. Anything else? I'm kind of keeping track, Tim, I do.
We're
And,
glad.
if y'all make a motion, it would be to approve of the ordinance as written, subject to all the changes that you have indicated here tonight, which will be to remove number subsection F, subsection 6, 7, and 11, and to amend subsection F10 to add the word commercial in front of use at the very end of that section. And I think that was everything, correct?
So yes.
I motion to move everything that you just said.
And there was a second in there too.
I'll second.
All right, and it passes unanimously. All right, action, direction, discussion, is that new? Direction, discussion. Anybody have anything?
Again, I just want to reiterate, y'all have every right to show up at the city council meeting if y'all want to make sure council hears what you communicated here tonight.
You have anything? Board members, anything?
Nope.
All right, we are adjourned.